Allison.
And we're at Legends Brewery.
First question. Do you prefer craft beers or big boys?
Definitely craft beers. I think that craft beer puts a lot more time and effort into how they brew their beers and how they market them as well. I think big boys are lazy beers. That's just my personal opinion. I mean, they say that they're like, craft lagers or this and that. And I mean, they spend a lot of money on their advertising, which makes them popular. But the craft beers, I just think, have a genuine personality versus the corporate feel of the big boys. So, that's my response.
Do you know what your biggest seller is here?
Definitely out of the year-rounds, the lager, just because there are a lot of people who don't drink beer or who are new to the beer scene, and we always suggest the lager to them because it's the easiest thing. It's the lightest beer. It's not too happy. It's not too malty. It's just a nice medium. But definitely, if people who are here that are beer geeks, is what we call them, they'll go for the taproom series that we have. So the Bourbon Barrel Browns, the Imperial Browns, the Imperial Hop Fest, anything that has a really malt or hop forward taste.
How often do you change your specials?
Well, we have seasonal specials. So right now we're doing the Belgian Wit, which is still considered wintertime, but we had a spring boot beer, which was really nice. But it just depends, I think, if we come up with a new beer or not. And we circulate things too, so it just depends.
What type of beer do you recommend for people that aren't big beer drinkers?
Definitely the lager. The lager is going to be the lightest beer that we have. It's got a nice smooth finish. It's a little bit not bold, but it's got a little bit of a medium body. It's going to have a balance of maltiness and hoppiness, but either one you can't really taste one or the other. It's just a really nice light beer. That's the one that I suggest. Or, like I suggested to you, a brown, which is malt forward, so it's going to be sweet. It's not going to be too bitter, which is what I think a lot of people are afraid of.
When you go out to dinner, do you go for craft beers or big beers?
Definitely craft beer if I'm drinking beer. I just think it has more character and more taste to it than, excuse my French, but I call it the big boys. It tastes like moose piss.
The supply chain for craft beers starts off with the suppliers. They get the raw materials from local farms. The raw materials include the essentials, which are malts, water, hops, and yeast. The extra ingredients include coffee beans, spices, fruits, and sugars. After the raw materials, it gets sent off to the brewery. There, they research and develop and mix the ingredients into the brewing equipment. Each individual brew requires about 20 hours of work. That's not including the size. Finally, they get barreled again, which most beers are not aged, but the higher end beers normally take about 6 months to age. Thirdly, after the brewing stage, it gets packaged. There, whether it's a can or a bottle, it gets labeled. Each case has 24 bottles. They get put on pallets, and each truck has 18 pallets. Finally, shipment and distribution. Typically, distributors' responsibilities include marketing beers to restaurants and retailers. There, they teach retailers how to serve the beers, check for freshness, and account for product loss along the way. Craft beers represent 1 out of every 10 beers sold in the U.S. The craft beer market is up 19.6 billion.
So following the supply chain for craft beers, we're going to be talking about the supply chain for big boys. And the first step of their process is milling. Milling is simply grounding the barley, malt, and rice and making sure that it is precisely weighted out. The next step of the process is mashing. Mashing occurs when the barley, malt, and rice are mixed with water. The natural malt then breaks down the starch from the grains into fermentable sugars. Then the third step of the process is straining. Straining is when the combined grain mash from the step before is strained, which leaves a sugar amber liquid called wort. Then the fourth step of the process is the brew kettle stage. In the brew kettle stage, the hops are added to the boiling wort in the brew kettles to add the spicy taste in the beer. The fifth stage of the process is called primary fermentation. In this process, the wort is cooled and then the yeast is added. For 6 days, the yeast ferments the wort into beer. The sixth step of the process is most important for creating the perfect Budweiser. Beechwood aging is the process when the beer is naturally carbonated and aged on beechwood chips for 21 days to mature the flavor of the beer. The Anheuser-Busch Corporation is the only major brewer in the world to use the beechwood aging process. The final stage of the process is the finishing stage. During this stage, brewers remove yeast and unstable protein materials from the beer. The beer is then chill-proofed and filtered before being packaged to put on the shelves. However, before the product is put on the shelves for customers to purchase, each batch of Budweiser is tasted by the brewmaster at least 5 times during its life at the brewery. They also make sure to check all the raw materials in the product, taste the samples from various stages of the brewing process, and compare the packaged beer between batches to ensure consistency. Each batch of Budweiser follows the same family recipe used by 5 generations of Busch family brewmasters. The family recipe is practiced in 12 different locations throughout the United States.
How would you describe your experience here at a brewery as opposed to going to a restaurant and just ordering a beer?
I like the idea of the flight because we were able to try different types of beers. Compared to just going to dinner and just sticking to one type of beer or just getting multiple beers, we're getting a feel of every single type, basically.
Just because for me, craft beer is something like when I go out to like breweries or a restaurant, I look forward to it, but I would never like go out of my way to go and find it.
We talked a little about price. Do you think that, I guess, craft beers being higher in price is one of the hindrances to people not wanting to buy craft beers? So a lot of people view it as craft beers they're more expensive, but they're higher in quality. So if the beers were the same price, I think craft beers would still have the same brand equity.
I feel like people are kind of like, I feel like people would don't want to go out of the way to find craft beer because it is more expensive. But then again, they like looking at like big beers versus craft beers. You put a lot more time and effort into a craft beer as opposed to having the same recipe for over 20 years. So I mean, you kind of get what you're paid for. But I mean, I do understand how people like won't go out of the way because it is a lot more expensive. But you're paid for what's being put into it.
I don't think people buy craft beer just because of the taste. Like you have your beer drinkers, but you have your beer drinkers who just like the mild taste of beer. And then you have your beer drinkers who look for a little more, and you get that in craft beer because it is stronger and it does have different flavors. So I think that's the reason why people don't, get craft beers. It's just because it's a different taste.
So, Stefan, after trying and taste testing all the flights, now just bought his first craft beer pint. Congratulations. How do you feel?
I feel like it was really good. I wanted to try it in a bigger sample size, to get more of it.
Is it holding its own? Is it doing
It
good?
is. I definitely come here again.
I'm pretty good at drinking beer. I'm pretty good at drinking beer.